Most people think that they are having experiences, when what they are really having is interpretations of experiences. And this way that the mind functions has caused me to be wrong many times. And if I've been wrong many times because of this, there are many other people that have been and are still wrong because of this as well. Hello from Sweden, and welcome to Everyday Mystic, a channel about God, about freedom, and about spiritual awakening. Today's video I'm going to start by making a confession. I have not always known what I've been talking about, even though I've managed to convince myself that I have known exactly what I was talking about. This has to do with a lot of different factors, but I think that my example is a rather interesting example. Because during the past about 7 years, I've had some really overwhelming spiritual experiences. And what happened was that I had the initial experiences that were objective experiences, and then my mind took them and tried to fit them into a pre-existing belief system. It used my wants, wishes, desires, etc. to create an image of what it was that I actually experienced. But I honestly have very little idea what these experiences actually was. But they serve as a very important example for a lot of things that we are facing today in the world. And a lot of things that we are looking at from a historical perspective as well. I think that we can be fairly certain that a lot of religious belief systems and everything that they entail come from genuine experiences. But genuine experiences does not mean that we interpret them correctly. And I'm going to try and explain this as thorough as possible. You see, first we have the experience, and then, as I said, our minds try to make sense of them. And what do they use? They use belief systems, as I already talked about. And if you have followed my channel, you know that I talk a lot about identity and belief systems. And I do this for very good reasons, because these things tend to take on a life of their own. We are not really in control of our identities or our belief systems. I have a whole video about it that will be available on the end screen at the end of the video. But the thing is that when we are having an experience, especially if we have an emotional attachment to our identity or our belief system, then it becomes important that the experiences conform to said identity and belief system. And of course I talked about wants, wishes, desires. We want our experiences to mean a certain thing. We want them to be congruent with our perception of reality, of our pre-existing beliefs. Especially if we hold on very tightly to our beliefs. Perhaps we believe that if we stray from our beliefs, something bad is going to happen. Perhaps we feel that our identity is under attack and then we need to defend it, and so on. All of these things contribute to how we interpret our experiences. We want to use known frameworks when we interpret them. And now, as we are going through our spiritual awakenings, as we are waking up to that the world is a very different place from what it appears to be when we approach it with the five senses, when we are waking up to the fact that this little 3D reality is just a tiny little spectrum of the whole spectrum of experience that we are able to have when we don't have the filters on anymore. So, we diminish our experiences by putting these filters on them. And I want you to understand exactly how deep this runs, because this goes for everything. I'm just using religion and spirituality as a potent example because there is so much room for confusion when it comes to these areas. Why specifically these areas? Because we are dealing fundamentally with subjective experiences. Sure, we can have philosophical debates about the existence of God and so on, and discuss all kind of matters when it comes to this. But in the end, what drives religion and spirituality always has been and always will be individual experiences, at least until these things are actually objectively proven, which might happen through quantum physics eventually, but right now, whatever else may be true, we are in some sort of transition stage. A transition state where we are going from these confused, separate individuals to realizing that there is a spiritual nature to reality. We are in essence one. We are all parts of God's infinite consciousness. All of these things are things that are being revealed to us in this point in history. But right now we are at a transition stage. And a very important part of this transition stage is to actually start seeing through all of these illusions that we are living under. And one of these illusions, and I want to make this very clear, is this separation between our experiences on the one hand and how we interpret these experiences. And I would go so far as actually calling this a dysfunction of our minds. Because this does not lead to any truth, it only leads to distortion. And we need to see through this. At the core of this lies our tendency also to confuse words with reality. We think that when we have put something into words, when we have described something, our minds trick us into thinking that we have actually understood the phenomenon, understood the experience, understood that which the words are pointing to. But we have not. And the further we get away from the actual event in history, the more apparent this becomes. Because, for example, and I know you understand that I'm pointing to something very specific, but let's say 2,000-3,000 years ago, people lived with a completely different understanding of the world. People had completely different references, and we usually underestimate how much this matters. I want you to think about this. What a person that lived a couple of thousand years ago knew about the world, what they knew about themselves, psychology, computers, electricity, the understanding of the vastness of the universe and so on. None of this was able to a person who lived 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. Understand this when you approach, for example, religious scripture. I'm not telling you to think in a specific way. I'm just telling you to use your mind and use your mind to understand all of the components that are present when you are trying to understand something. So this is a very good example of how we tend to think that an interpretation is the actual experience, the actual event. And I've fallen victim to this as well, as I said. When I started to have these very powerful experiences, I tried to fit them into the framework of Christianity, actually. And I want to tell you this, I still have a strong belief in Jesus and what Jesus stood for. I think that Jesus was something more than just an enlightened master. But I can, for example, say that I don't truly know what is meant when someone says that Jesus is the Son of God, for example. This is another very good example. Think about this. As soon as I mention Jesus to you, it invokes all kinds of images, ideas, interpretations, etc. If you are a Christian listening to this, it will, of course, make you interpret this Jesus in a very positive manner. But for a person that has been hurt by religion, for example, that person will conjure up all kinds of images of oppression and things like that. As I said, I feel that there is something special with Jesus, but I can honestly not at all anymore subscribe to the belief system of Christianity as it is taught in the churches, as it is taught in classical theology. But this was the framework that I was using when I interpreted my experiences. Now I'm talking a little bit about my personal journey here. I was never a classical Christian, I was more into mysticism, but I was still affected by the belief system when I was interpreting my experiences. I wanted to just lay it out so you understand where I'm coming from. And also in this, and believe me, this is getting somewhere, I am still utterly convinced that we have reached an end point of some kind. I believe that there is some truth to what religions are calling the end times, and that we are in some sense living in this. Not in the sense that the whole world will be destroyed and God will come down and send sinners to hell and save to heaven or something like that. I think that this is a way of controlling people, a way of controlling people's minds. I actually am thoroughly convinced that the times that we are living in now are the best time to live in for everyone, including even people that are committing really heinous acts. Because things are starting to get revealed. Part of this is what I'm trying to do with this channel, to show all of the distortions that is hidden in plain sight when it comes to how we interpret the human experience, how we approach reality, how we look at each other, how we look at other people, etc. That is part of what I'm trying to reveal, because I am thoroughly convinced that every single person on the planet would stop acting destructively if they truly understood the conditions under which they are living in. And thus we remove all of this need for a punishing God that sentences some people to suffer because of their actions or their lack of belief or whatever. So this is what I believe about the times that we are living in. But, and I want to make a big confession here, I had this sort of romanticized image about the end times, about certain people waking up to what is really going on and so on. And honestly, I still believe a lot of these things. I am thoroughly convinced that those that rule the world, for example, are not the people that we are told are ruling the world. I'm going to leave it at that because I think that the algorithm might not like me talking about these things. But I'm still very much awake to all of these things. But there also came in a lot of distortions for me when it came to this. I started, as I've talked about before, building an identity as a truth sayer, as someone who has seen through the lies of the establishment and so on. Not that I was wrong, but I also had a lot of things that were clouding my perception. So, I had experiences, my mind started telling me what they meant. And I'm going to go a little further and also talk about how this can play itself out in other ways. For example, and I'm going to just use it in a quoting manner, the thought that if this is true, then this and this and this must also be true. What do I mean by this? If I come across a message from a person, and it turns out that this person is right, our minds have a very strong tendency to think that, oh, if this is right, then this and this and this that this person is saying is also right. Or this can be part of a worldview. I think, for example, actually, what we talked about before, Christianity. I think that there is a lot of truth to Christianity, a lot of truth to the Bible actually. But a lot of people, when they are starting to get a taste of this truth, and I was more or less falling into this trap myself, start to think that, oh, well, then the whole package must be true as well. This is an illusion. So, we try to fit things into an existing belief system. We start drawing conclusions from them. And as I said, this is not always wrong, but we need to be cautious with this. Because our minds play trick on us. Our minds bring us into all kinds of stories, ideas, etc. And we need to be able to take a step back from this and actually see what is going on. We need to actually start to separate our experiences from our interpretations of them. And when we do this, we are starting to wake up to something so much grander in the human experience. As I said, we are part of God. The world is an enchanted place. You can have so many interesting, fascinating experiences when you are living here. And we can actually start to truly remove the distortions that are keeping us trapped, that are keeping us separate, that are keeping us from understanding the human experience to its full capacity. And that is where we are going to end today. As I said before, check out the description and the comment section and the end screen for other things that we are doing. I'm going to leave some links to videos on my other channel that are about perception, that are much more educational but are also made with a lot more AI, but I stand behind every word that is spoken on the channel, and I go through and work with every single script for every single video. So it's not that I just post random stuff on the internet. No, that is not what the channel is about. So check out that channel. There is a link to it in the description and at the end screen and in the comment section. And if you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment and share the video on social media and other places. All of it helps a small channel such as this one to grow, which, as you imagine, is not always that easy. So if you found this video helpful, please help sharing it. And other than that, just sincerely thank you for your time.